Hi, this is not going to be my usual content, or at least content I think you all would be expecting from me. But if this is your first time here, welcome to my channel, The Enlightened Rose, where I talk about a whole bunch of different stuff, mainly spiritually based. And if you're returning, lovely, hi, it's so good to see you again. But yeah, this is not going to be my typical video. This is going to be a little bit of a interesting intro to this video. I will say this video is going to be commentary from a spiritual perspective of the show The Residents, which just dropped on Netflix. Really, really good. I just binge watched the whole thing, and it made me have a lot of thoughts and opinions, which is why I'm making this video. But I am going to have to give a warning before going into the rest of this video that I will be touching slightly on some plot elements in the story. I'm not going to be going like super depth into spoilers about the show. As some of you may know, the show is kind of like a murder mystery type of story, so I'm not going to be addressing this video like who did the act in the show and whatnot. But I will be saying some information about some of the characters, so if you don't want any type of spoilers or anything like that, now will be the time to click off. This is not the video for you. But if you're okay with a couple small spoilers here and there, I'm just going to be referencing some of the characters and their actions in the show to tie into what I'm going to be talking about in this video. And I also have to give a disclaimer that I will be talking about racial and social and possibly political impacts in this video. So if you are sensitive to that, this is also not the video for you. I will not be apologizing for the things that I have to say in this video, and I'd like to just clarify and say it now that I am a fully Hispanic woman. I'm Puerto Rican on both sides with indigenous native blood from my mom's side of the family. And I just want to get that out of the way and address that because I've been told I can be racially ambiguous or like a little racially ambiguous. Not quite sure there, but just want to address that. So this is the lens and commentary coming from a woman of color for my entire commentary of this video. But yeah, I hope you will enjoy what I have to say, and let's get into the video. So, first off, I want to give some background context to the show, The Residents, just a brief summary of it. So, it is about the White House, staff in the White House, like the behind the scenes crew, not necessarily like the president and all of his secretaries and whatnot, president of the United States in the American White House, but more about the people who work in the White House and serve the president's family while they live there and things like that. And in the beginning of the show, there is a very chaotic state dinner going on, and there's unfortunately a murder that takes place. And the premise of the show is about the murder being unveiled and unraveled by Cordelia Cupp, who is the detective on the case. She's the main character of the show, and did a phenomenal, wonderful job. Love the character, love the story writing. But I will be kind of addressing and pointing about her later on in the video, her specifically, and the role that the unspoken role that she played amongst everybody else throughout the entirety of the show. And I really would like to be focusing and highlighting on two different characters right now. Lily Shumack, I believe is how her last name is pronounced, and St. Pierre. So they were both I would say Lily was a more prominent character in the show rather than St. Pierre, but he does show up a lot, um, very annoyingly so. And the reason why I'm bringing them up is because in the show, Lily is the chief staff secretary or the social secretary for the White House. So she plans like events and galas and other things like that. Anything that would be more like social, like people coming and doing like Christmas tours and stuff like that of the White House. That's kind of her role. And St. Pierre is this, they call him an energy medium. I don't really know. We'll get to that. We will address that in a second. But we'll address him. But he is mentioned throughout the story as we're going through Lily's backstory and her involvement in the entire case and things like that. And because she met him at like some retreat type of thing, and he's technically her like unofficial advisor. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. I don't know what the thought process of that was, but they kind of did speak a little briefly about how previous presidents, I don't remember in the show if it was um President Roosevelt or if it was President Kennedy, that used an astrologer to help predict certain events or to have guidance on certain decisions to make certain political events that were going on. And I have not checked if that was politically or historically accurate or not. I would assume so, based on the amount of research that went into the show to um, bring in like real life comparisons to what was going on in the plot of the show. Obviously, the show is a fake written story, but they were bringing in a lot of historical elements from like past presidencies and things like that. So I believe it is to be true, but do not quote me on that. So yeah, they were kind of foiling it to that oh yeah, there was this past presidency that used an astrologer to do all of these events. So Lily, the social secretary, has this energy medium who is advising her on all of this stuff. And literally, you see in the show during one of the very important scenes where she's like moving people around for that state dinner, like diplomatic people from different countries and whatnot. She's on the phone with this random energy medium, not vetted or hired or technically has any professional experience to be involved with anything White House or politically related, telling her like, oh hey, like move so and so here and there in the seating chart. And for those of you who do not know, I actually plan events for a living. I'm a corporate event planner. I have my degree in hospitality and tourism management. I've been a wedding planner. I know quite a bit about events. And for certain situations like that, or certain sensitive situations like a state dinner between two different government parties, where you place and sit people is a very, very big deal because it could have political implications. Something very small and insignificant is that you would think about, oh, it's just a seating chart, is not just a seating chart. Um, a lot of things could occur in the butterfly effect from placing certain people next to each other at an event like that. So that's a very, very big deal for a lot of different reasons. But that's just one of the examples of how he advised her and was very involved in this story, despite seeming like somebody who shouldn't be involved at all. So this now brings me to, we're going to do a little bit of a character breakdown analysis to tie into why I even wanted to make this video in the first place. So we're going to start with Miss Lily, the social secretary. Now, her role is kind of wild, kind of crazy. I really, really suggest sitting down and watching the entire show. It was a very captivating, very riveting show. It's only 8 episodes. Worth the watch, worth a binge watch. And I'm somebody who doesn't particularly care about like American uh, politics. I'll put that in quote unquote. I don't generally like to watch a lot of like American historical stuff or things that have to do with like past presidencies and whatnot. But this was a really, really good show. If you like murder mysteries, this was amazing. Writing was chef's kiss, phenomenal. But um, going back to Lily's character, she was a very interesting character. We'll put it like that. Lily was a character who was brought in with the brand new administration in this show, and there's a contrast between her and all of the house staff, like people who've been working there for 10, 15, 20 plus years, like been there long, long before her, been there through multiple different presidencies, understands the White House from the ins and outs and how to run the White House. And it was kind of a foiling between, or kind of like a direct comparison between her as somebody who was like new with the brand new presidency that was leaning very, very liberal and wanted to introduce a bunch of new stuff versus the old house staff, which represented like old traditions and history and culture and how things have been run in the White House for a very long time. And she butted heads with a lot of the older staff and whatnot, and she wanted to be very like modern. For example, they mentioned like a whole Christmas thing going on at the White House, and it was a tradition to have like gingerbread houses and traditional Christmas decorations. And her idea to make everything more modern and new was to have like a wellness thing going on at the White House where they had facials and like hydrogen facials and like all this like crazy new stuff, things you would expect to see at like an LA wellness store pop up. It's very, very like millennial, oh, I want to be fun and quirky, let's do something that's never been done before type of energy. Um, and what I want to compare Lily to, and the first part of this video title, I have not addressed that yet. You all are probably wondering what the hell I'm talking about, saying the poison of white women and spiritual men. Well, we're going to get to the white woman part. Now, going back to my disclaimer from earlier, when I am going to be addressing this and speaking about this, I want to make it very well known that I'm a woman of color. I'm somebody who is very welcoming, very accepting. I don't like discrimination of any type of kind. And I think a lot of people don't like to talk about more sensitive issues within spirituality because they don't want to rock the boat, or they think that spirituality inherently is its own thing and it's removed from other parts of society. But I think that's very false. I think that's very ignorant. And I think that's very misinformed. It's a very misinformed take to have. And I find that a lot of very well known spiritualists nowadays, or very popular spiritualists, will not address this and will not talk about it for one reason or another. Probably because once you start talking about politics and racial issues and whatnot, you become controversial and you're not easy to digest anymore. But for me, I like to talk about the truth and what matters to me and what I think is important to people, and speak about the elephant in the room that other people are afraid to talk about. And this, my friends, is the elephant in the room. Um, you really cannot get deep into the root of a lot of spiritual practices and whatnot without actually taking the time to look back at history and especially the racial implications of different things. So, going back to Lily, essentially her role in this entire show was to show I would say the contrast, like I said earlier, between the old and the new. And it was mentioned in the show that she's rich. She has a very rich family. She grew up in Boca Raton, a lot of money. Probably got her position at the White House through connections because she keeps mentioning her dad a lot, that type of an individual. It shows how in society that there's a category of women, and I'm going to be speaking in the context of America for right now, within the context of the show, because this is taking place in the White House. But there is a category of white women who are very entitled and will take their privilege, because as much privilege as they get, or as adjacent as they are to white men, they will never be white men, because at the end of the day, white men will also not hesitate to take their rights away and also subjugate them, because under a patriarchy, the most powerful and most important people are white, heterosexual, cisgendered men. That's just, it is what it is. That's how things are operating under the society. But the closest to them, like the next rank under that ladder, is white women, or privileged wealthy white women. And they have a tendency to come in and take practices and take ideas and just a whole bunch of other stuff from different cultures, very often Black women, Hispanic women, women of color, and rebrand it to fit their own image. And then once it no longer serves them, they throw it away and then go back to being a white woman when it's convenient to them. Good example of this is blackfishing. There's been a lot of conversations about that throughout the past couple of years, of white women who look Asian or Black or Hispanic for whatever reasons, because that was more popular and trending in society. And now that it's no longer cool and trendy to be ethnic, a lot of white women are losing weight and losing their tans and becoming stick thin, heroin chic. Just throwing us out there to fit the European beauty standard of being very, very thin, very, very pale. It all ties back into systemic racism and white supremacy. So there's a there's a big theme going on here, and it's seen very clearly, or I would like to say that it was the director's kind of social commentary, or maybe the writers, about like the political climate of what's going on in America right now on white women. Um, failing a lot of other women in America in the context of current political situations going on right now. I won't get too into that, but it's very, very acute, or it's just very present in this show towards the very end, how much she put herself on a pedestal. She came into something that she did not agree with. She was like, I don't like these traditions, whatever, screw your traditions. I want to do things my way. And I deserve to be that way because I'm wealthy and I'm white and I have daddy's money and I'm entitled. And the whole reason why I'm bringing this up is because this also happens in spiritual spaces. This video is probably going to address my top two biggest hot takes when it comes to spiritual practices. And this is the first one, is that white women do not need to be as involved in spiritual practices and they don't need platforms, period. And now, before all of you go in the comments and you're angry at me and you're doing your shit, I'm going to give the disclaimers to that, because as to everything, nothing is ever black and white, it's gray. The white women I'm addressing are not white women who are involved in their own cultural practices. Now, what I mean by that is, if you know you're Irish and you practice Celtic folk magic and that's your jam, I'm not talking about you. If you know that you have Nordic blood, Nordic ancestry, you're Swedish, things like that, and you practice like Norse paganism and other things, I'm not talking about you. If you know that you have ties to like Italian deities, the Roman deities, and you do Italian folk magic, I'm also not talking about you. You know your cultural background, you know what deities are connected with you, you know your family's history, and you practice things that are sacred to you. I'm not addressing y'all. That's not who I'm talking about right now. Who I'm talking about is the category of a lot of new, really new age spiritualist women, or Wicca. Don't like Wicca. Um, fun fact, fun fact, Wicca is based on racism. And so anybody who's running around being like, I'm a Wiccan, would probably think twice about wanting to associate with them, depending on your stances on racism. But um who I'm really addressing right now are the white women who come into spiritual practices. They take bits and pieces of things that they see from other cultures. And more often than not, it's Black women who are like hoodoo and voodoo practitioners, root workers, or Hispanic women who are in brujeria, santeria, or other, like, other people that are partaking in like closed practices, like ATRs, or if they're getting into initiation to work with like Oshun and some of those other deities and whatnot. They will take bits and pieces of different cultural practices that they're not educated in, and they regurgitate them and post them online. And because they're white, they just blow up. They just blow up. I've seen it happen time and time again, and more often than not, I've seen it happen way more with astrology than spirituality, probably because it's a lot easier to fake with astrology. But there's been multiple incidents of very, very famous astrologers, um, very famous astrologers who will copy the takes of Black astrologers and just rebrand it as their own and pretend that it's them who's doing the work and reading charts and whatnot to put information out. And because they're white and the social media loves to promote white women, that's who gets a platform. And it's really messed up. I even know for me, as a very light, almost white passing Hispanic, I would have certain privileges based on my appearance and how I look. And my content, even if it would be the exact same as a woman who's darker skinned than me, my content would probably get pushed more because of colorism and a bunch of other things related to racism. That's just how social media unfortunately works. There's been a bunch of creators who come out and talk about the pay disparity between Black creators and white creators, or similar instances of that. And it really grinds my gears in a spiritual sense, because you have a lot of these women who get very into spirituality for, I don't know if it's the aesthetic of it, that they're like, oh my god, crystals, I love crystals, yay, like love and light. I really don't like those people. Like that's gonna we're gonna input the side note here. Any spiritualist who's running around like, oh my god, love and light only, I'm a light worker, I only touch the light, everything else is bad, I only love and positivity, I can't fucking stand you. So sorry to say it like that, but you're really insufferable because you know that's a facade. It's very much a facade, and you're running around putting misinformation, and you're also villainizing and demonizing things that are just naturally inherent in the world. I don't like the concept or the breakdown between light and dark. I think that's probably the stupidest shit I've ever heard, and it's very, very new aged. It's extremely new aged. Because if you actually look back and read historical texts, if you look into spiritual practices for what they are, very, very old spiritual practices, you will learn and come to understand that you need both the light and the dark to be whole. Because you naturally have both. The world has both. The universe has both. So you sitting there being like, I'm a light worker, I don't touch anything that's dark, I don't touch those demonic entities, I don't touch those demonic energies. What you're pushing is repackaged Christian bullshit. That's what you're doing. And more often than not, a lot of these women, at least I'm American, so I'm going to talk about my experience with women in North America. I can't speak for the rest of the world. Right now, this is just kind of like my bubble of, I'm talking about North America, mainly the United States. So if you're finding that this is not applying to you and you're in Europe or you're in a different part of the world, okay, cool. Please share your experience in the comments. But I'm going to talk about my experience. And in my experience, as Christianity is very, very prevalent in the West, most of these individuals are coming from a very strict Christian background. And due to religious trauma or, not liking Christianity for one reason or another, a lot of them tend to have bad experiences or stories. They just jump straight into spirituality and they think it's great. They promote it for a little bit. They like the nice parts of it. They're like, oh my God, it's such a cute aesthetic. I have crystals. I have like Palo Santo. I'm going to run around burning and all of this stuff. And look at me. I have tarot cards. Like, isn't this so cute? This is such an aesthetic. Spirituality has been made to be an aesthetic when it is not an aesthetic. Do you think that people who existed long before us, who were living in awful fucking conditions, and the only thing that got them through every single day was praying to whoever they believed in for things to get better? Do you think it was an aesthetic for them? Do you think for our ancestors, especially if you're a person of color, very much so if you're a person of color, and if you have ties to ancestors who were enslaved, do you think the work that they were doing while they were enslaved, the prayers that they were doing, and the songs and the hymns that they were doing, do you think that was an aesthetic to them when they were being under that constant, just awful treatment day in and day out? No, it was not an aesthetic to them. Spirituality is not an aesthetic. And on another side note on that, I have a big gripe with people who worship certain deities like Aphrodite and then want to share their experiences online. You can do that. That's perfectly fine. But instead of talking about actual work or actual things that are beneficial to working with that deity or promoting how to connect with them or just sharing their own experiences, they turn it into an aesthetic. I don't want to see you selling me your room that you're like, oh my God, I'm an Aphrodite devotee. My whole room is pink. It's pearls. It's clamshells. Oh my God, guys, look. You just look like a victim of capitalism, promoting that, oh my God, I made my whole room pink and seashells because I work with Aphrodite. Okay, cool, but what actual work have you done with Aphrodite? Did she ask for all of that stuff as offerings? Is that just of your own accord? Do you actually sit down and work with her through hard lessons? Or are you one of those Aphrodite devotees who's like, oh, I like her because she's pink and I want to have a romantic relationship. Aphrodite, please help me find love. And then when she comes to them and is like, okay, well, we're going to work on your fear of abandonment first. We're going to work on your self-confidence issues. You should love yourself first. When they get hit with actual work from said deity, they don't want to do it because it's an aesthetic to them. They think it's a lifestyle when it's really not. But they're pushing all of this content, and because it's aesthetically pleasing and it's pretty and it looks like a Pinterest board, they have hundreds and hundreds of followers but they're just an empty follower. I wouldn't even call them a worshiper at that point. Or I would sit there and be like, how much are you actually connecting with the deity? Like, do you know them? And I'm sitting here as a very big Aphrodite devotee. I love the color pink. But when I sit down to talk with her and I do my own work with her, a lot of it has to do with her lovingly yelling at me, being like, why are you running around saying that you love me and you want to do all this stuff for me, but you don't love yourself? I need you to love yourself first. You want to do this for me? Actually, why don't you go give yourself a shower because you haven't showered in a hot minute and you feel like crap? Instead of sitting there being like, oh, I'm going to do a candle for you in devotion of you. She's like, no, go take a shower. Go take care of yourself because you're important too. That's how it looks like when I work with the goddess Aphrodite. That's how I know it goes with a lot of her genuine, real devotees. But for a lot of people who love to post online because she's a very popular goddess, I would question if their practice looks like that. So, coming back to white women as a whole, that is just a small example of the gripe that I have with a lot of white women that are in spiritual practices, that are these new age influencers, these new age teachers that don't really know what they're talking about. And it's very misinformed and in bad taste for you to sit here and say, okay, well, it's new age time. I want to do stuff my way and not acknowledge or even learn any of the proper historical context of things, the foundation of things. I am a firm believer of, learn the basics, learn your shit, and then do what you want to do. I love chaos magic. I think chaos witches are great. I think head witches are great. But there's also an air of you need to learn basics and you need to learn where things are coming from, especially when it comes to cultural practices. The amount of times I've seen a honey jar go trending on social media when in reality that's you're starting to get into the territory of doing like brujeria, santeria, when you want to sit there being like, I'm doing like an actual honey jar. Um, or well, honey jars can also be tied, I believe, into hoodoo, I believe. But for me, like going into the actual like brujeria practices that I grew up with from my family, and what I was taught with, there was I very distinctly remember a video, and the woman in the video was I believe she was Mexican, I believe, but she was speaking in Spanish, and she was showing people how to do like a honey spell and stuff like that, and it went viral on social media, and there was a bunch of white women doing it and then wondering why they were having weird experiences afterwards or having bad luck. And the reason to that is you're doing cultural practices that are not meant for you. They're not meant for you. Another big example of this is this like huge TikToker. I don't even know her whole account name. I don't want to say her whole account name. She doesn't need any more clout than she has because she has a shocking amount of followers. But her name is Sarah, and a lot of hoodoo content creators on that app. I know Voodoo Bay or like Voodoo content creators, and I believe her name is Voodoo Bay. Believe her name's Voodoo Bay on TikTok. She did a whole series of videos telling that Sarah girl to stop saying that she speaks for Oshun, a closed deity that you need to be initiated in that practice to communicate and divine with and stuff like that. To stop saying that she was doing channeled messages for her. And literally did an entire video of her doing proper divination through her practices she was initiated into to show that, yeah, no, this random white woman does not speak to Oshun. And from a cultural context, she wouldn't be speaking to her. Some of these deities are culturally closed off for a reason. They only want to speak to people of their culture, of like what their ancestors have gone through and help those people. There's plenty of open pantheons and there's a lot that are also closed, and people need to respect that. You need to be looking at what you're doing instead of just seeing it randomly online and being like, oh, that's cool, I'm going to copy it, regurgitate it, post it, and then boom, I'm like famous overnight. That shit's not okay. It's not cool, it's not cute, and it's dangerous because you're playing with practices you don't know, and then you get upset when there's a backfire on it. But who's to blame in that situation? The other part of this is the people and individuals who are, like I said earlier, a lot of these individuals are coming from Christianity and push a Christian mindset, like a repackaged Christian mindset on a lot of these practices. The reason we have Wicca and why you have all these women who are like, oh, I'm a love and light light worker, I only do love and light magic, is because what happens in a lot of Christian practices, it's shame. It's puritanical shame. It is to shame you into thinking that if you don't follow and like a specific set of rules, if you don't fit into a certain box and category, that you are bad and you're evil and you're going to be punished. You're going to be sent to hell or whatever's going on. You're going to be punished. That's the whole BS of that. And these people are pushing that onto other spiritual practices they have no business in speaking of and have no idea what they're talking about. It irks the living crap out of me, the amount of white women that I see get on social media and start talking stuff, just start saying shit. And then they're like, oh, I don't touch anything dark. I don't like working with these like dark entities, these dark goddesses, these demons, villainizing the infernal divine, villainizing certain deities like the Morgan, Hecate. We'll talk about the Hecate in a second. That they're like, oh, they ruined my life, they're so awful, whatever, whatever. I don't touch anything that's not love and light. You sound like an idiot. You sound like a real fucking idiot. Because at the end of the day, I promise all of you, all of these love and light spiritualists, all these love and light people, if they were in a life or death situation, I promise you 9 times out of 10, they're going to be the most nasty person in the room. Didn't even need to kill a person. You know, it's like you're stuck and stranded in a house, can't get out. And everybody's like, oh, okay, what do we do? They're the first one that's like, okay, we're going to go eat the person in the corner now. I'm like freaking out. We're just going to get rid of them, eat them. Nobody like didn't even have to be that extreme. I promise you those are the types of individuals who are jumping to these conclusions. These are the people you're giving platforms to. These are the people that need to shut up. Respectfully, you need to be quiet. Going into Hecate, I cannot tell you the amount of women, white women, I've seen in the past couple of months posting their journeys of working with Hecate and like claiming to be oracles of her, speaking for her, and all this stuff, doing entire like TikTok pages or like social media accounts dedicated to her, just to turn around a couple months later to be like, actually, she ruined my life. And this scared me, so I'm running back to the church. This is all evil. You're all bad. And I sit there and I laugh because either one of two things happened. Either A, they really did work with Hecate, and because she's a goddess of liminal spaces, and is an underworld goddess, she will make you face shit that you don't want to look at. She will make you face your shadow and your ego. And when people who are getting into spirituality as a whole, as a lifestyle, because they think it's a cute aesthetic, when you're faced with your own shit, because that's what the purpose of this all is to address your shit so that you can get better and you can feel better and not be depressed and anxious all the goddamn time. When you do that, and it's in front of you in a mirror, people will freak out because they don't like to be told about themselves. They don't like to be uncomfortable. They don't like to be acutely aware of what's going on with themselves. They like to run away and hide. So they're like, nope, 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 that's too much. She's evil. She's bad. I'm going to leave. I'm going right back to the church. And I actually really do hate this for genuine Christians or, genuine people who are, worshiping like the Christian God and Jesus and whatnot, because they're also not entities who are out here being like, be hateful, spew hate, da na 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 na. And they would also want you to be better in that, like in that true context, if that's who you like to pray to and that's who, like that's your belief system and whatnot. I hate it for that community of people because they're over here getting the short end of the stick, dealing with all of these other weirdos in their space when they're just trying to do some actual worship and practice on their own and stuff. So that's the first case. The second case is that these women were never connected with her to begin with. And because they're running around posting so much content and interacting and influencing so many people to either work with them in a certain way or not working with them in a certain way, deities will get angry when people are misrepresenting them on a large scale and impacting a lot of people and will do things. I don't know if y'all read, especially with the Greek pantheon, I don't know if you've read the Iliad, I don't know if you've read the poems and all of the historical context that we have, but they do things to humans. They get upset, they get petty and angry, and they will do things to humans. That is a thing. Just because you come from a Christian background and you may have not ever experienced, actual like works of a deity or works of a higher being popping up in your life, it happens with a lot of the other deities and a lot of the other pantheons, and a lot of them are very vocal and will interact with you, or they will fuck up your life if you're doing stuff they don't like and you're being disrespectful to them. It's called cause and effect. You are finding out the effect of your actions, you're finding out your consequences. So that's the main reason why I addressed, or I titled this video, The Poison of White Women, because white women have a tendency of coming into spaces that were not theirs originally. They steal and pilfer and take things from other cultures to rebrand it and repackage it and benefit off of it. And then as soon as it no longer benefits them, they just throw it all away and run away. And it's extremely disrespectful, it's dehumanizing, it's immoral, just across the board. And it happens in every single aspect of life. But in spiritual spaces, it grinds my gears the most. And I would like to make a personal comment or just a personal tidbit that every single friend, fake mentor I've had that's been very, very weird, very odd with me, wanting a destiny swap with me, or has a weird issue with me for no reason, or I can tell that they're jealous and envious of me, a woman of color, they're all white women. So I'm not saying all white women are bad. I'm just saying a lot of them are fucking weird. Off of my personal experiences, other people's experiences, what has happened in the world historically, that is my truth. If that's not your truth, cool. It is my truth. And I will also put a sub caveat that I'm not speaking to and addressing the white women who acknowledge their privilege, who acknowledge the cultural practices where they're getting things from, and give the proper credit and do the proper work to address that the stuff that they're talking about, their stuff that they're teaching, is not from them. From a cultural perspective, from a personal perspective, it's coming from somewhere else. If you're properly acknowledging and you're being an ally, that's wonderful. That's great. Also not addressing you. And if you watch this video and you're triggered, maybe ask yourself why you're triggered. Ask yourself, if the shoe fits. I don't know. But it's very annoying and nobody likes to talk about it or address it, that there's too many white women in all these spaces spreading misinformation, spreading hate, secretly doing toxic positivity, and just muddling up the pool for everybody, to the point that now spirituality has become an aesthetic and a commodification of something that is just a natural, ancient practice of life and how people have been living their lives for centuries. A lot of these different practices, and it's really gross. Now, the other part of the title, Spiritual Men, this is also where men, you can get mad at me. Actually, I'm kind of a misandrist. I don't really care if men like me or not. I quite frankly don't care what a lot of you have to say. So, what I'm about to say, I will give my disclaimer. Who I'm about to address are cis het men mainly. That's like the main category. And really, because I'm very, very inclusive and I love trans people, I will put the disclaimer in that, like, if you're AFAB, this isn't really for you, and I'll address why in a second, why you're not really in this category. And it kind of, your gender assigned at birth actually has something to do with what I'm talking about. So if you're AFAB, but you present to the world as a man, I'm not talking about you. Respect you. If you are the other, I don't remember the other acronym. I do not remember the other acronym, but if you were born and assigned male at birth, you are unfortunately in the category of men that I'm about to address and talk about. Again, your gender at birth kind of, it will make sense in a minute why I'm talking about that, but that is an important tidbit and caveat. Not really yelling at you the way I'm about to be upset at just the cis het men, but just giving that disclaimer for the inclusion. All right. So I very, 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 very strongly do not believe that men should be leaders in any type of spiritual practice. Now, of course, obviously there's like exceptions to this. I think in a couple different spiritual cultural practices, there were like men in charge of certain things and like that's not what I'm addressing right now. If that's like cultural specific thing, not addressing that. But I'm addressing the fact that we used to be matriarchies before the patriarchy took over and got upset because they wanted to do what? They wanted to subjugate women. Because the world was a much better place when we were in matriarchies and we were run by women. And this is going into spiritual practices. I do not believe that most men, if not all men, have the actual emotional intelligence and capacity to be in a spiritual like position of leadership and not abuse it. That's the main part, and that's really what I'm about to get into. They abuse it. And we're going to break this down. The main reason why I do not think that men should be in spiritual like leadership positions or positions of authority and power is because they are inherently less spiritual than women. Now my disclaimer for my trans and non-binary community is coming up. And the reason the reason why they are inherently less spiritual than women and will always be is because women bring life into the world. They literally create life through your womb. So if you are an individual who possesses a womb and you can have a baby, you are in the category of people who I'm like, yeah, you deserve to be in more spiritual positions of leadership and whatnot because you're directly created to source because you can give birth. That is why so many women are psychic and intuitive and they're like, oh, women have a sixth sense. Or a lot of people love to talk about, like, oh, moms have that weird sixth sense when their kid's in trouble. You always see people talking about the mom, but not the dad. Why? Because the mom carried you and gave birth to you and has that extra tie to you. She gave birth to you. Women create life. This is why women have been in charge, or societies that have matriarchies run so well, because women are just more naturally connected in spiritual ways to understand wisdom and guidance and whatnot. And they have the emotional intelligence to understand spiritual concepts and want to help people. Women are givers. Like when a woman is in her divine feminine energy, and like side note, both men and women, no matter what you want to present as or what you identify as, everybody has masculine energy and feminine energy. Some people have more than the other, but side note. But for women who are in their natural, like divine feminine energy, they're nurturing and they're caring, and who like, what do we live on? Mother Earth, Mother Nature. Why do we call it that? Because Mother Nature gives life. It's fertility. We have the plants and the animals and people. Everything that is bringing life and is very nurturing and brings love naturally into the world is women. It's feminine energy. And then you have the masculine that's there to provide and to protect and to go hunting and do all of those different types of things. So inherently there is a difference. There's a reason why divine feminines are told to just sit there and receive, because who goes and gets the stuff to give? It's the masculine, the divine masculine energy. Their role naturally in nature was never to be the one in charge receiving everything. Patriarchies don't really make sense. And we can tell by, history and looking at even the current state of the world right now, who's the country arguably with the best life quality, and the citizens are happy and things are going dandy. I believe it's I'm forgetting which European country it is, but there's a European country that's their entire government is women, and they're doing great and they're doing wonderful, while a lot of these other countries are not doing so wonderful. Who's in charge? When the women are in charge, things are going much better. Can't say the same about the men, but that's the first point. That is the first point about why I don't think men need to be in these spaces. The second point is, every single time that I've actually seen a male like mentor or a teacher or whatever, it's only like a short amount of time. It's inevitable almost that it comes out that they're a predator of some kind, that they gain this spiritual knowledge, and what do they do with it? They abuse it. is actually reminding me, this is incredibly, incredibly sad. And trigger warning for essay, like skip to like about like 2 minutes if you don't want to hear this. But of I believe this was in Congo, of a prison where they freed they freed the men's prison. I believe it was a facility that had like a men's prison and a women's prison. They freed the men's prison. I don't remember if they freed the women's prison or not. But instead of those men just being like, "Oh, I'm free, I'm gonna go home," what did they do? They went straight to the women's prison and they assaulted all of them very, very horrifically. And I think that just says a lot about men. I think that says a lot about men, how when they're are given the chance, they will not think twice about hurting women. Most men in today's world and society. And from a spiritual perspective, all of these men who learn spell work and know how to do spiritual matters and whatnot, they don't have the emotional intelligence or even just the normal intelligence. I do think most of them are very, very dumb, cannot think with anything except their nether regions, will take what they have known, and instead of trying to improve themselves or improve their community or, do something positive, what do? They prey upon women or just prey upon people in general. I've unfortunately heard a lot about different spiritual predators who are men who are like to run around to unassuming women or just people in general, being like, "Oh, I work with so and so deities, like if you don't send me like explicit content of you, explicit messages, whatever, whatever, like I'm gonna hex you with the help of this deity," and all this like disgusting, evil, crazy crap. um or just using I've almost been a victim of a random man who knew spiritual stuff, um, trying to do like binding magic on me and like obsession spells and stuff. Sir, I don't know you. Like that's where their mind goes. They're like, "Oh, I like this lady. I'm just going to do this spell work and stuff and try to make her obsessed with me and so I can treat her like however I want, like crap, and she will never leave." That's what men do with this type of information. Um, and it was a bad day for that man. I will say it was a bad day for that man, considering who is on my spiritual team, considering how I protect myself in my wards, just me alone. Um, he did not have a good time and everything. But I will say, you probably, if you are very spiritual and you're trying to do that type of stuff to another spiritual person, I would think twice and I would try to figure out who they work with and like what their life story is and everything. Because for me, in my case, my father's on the other side. I had a very, very crazy, scary, protective father on the other side. Do you think my deceased father is going to be letting random men do stuff like that to me and he's on the other side? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I was very happy to light my father's candle on his altar and tell him about that story. You should be very careful of who you do stuff like that on, because it could end up really, really, really bad for you. And it's very funny how just oftentimes too, I see a lot of these like men in the darker spaces, especially within like demonology and, excuse me, working with the infernal divine. I see a lot of really, really gross men who I think deserve to be shackled and put in cages, because if you would like to behave like an animal, you should be treated like an animal. Um, if your first thought, like genuinely, we have to have like this serious 101. If you are trying to get into, demonology, working with the infernal divine, and your primary reason is because you've heard of succubus and you're like, "Oh, I just want like a sex slave demon, whatever," I think you deserve to be, oh, I can't say it. Oh, I was gonna say something. I want to say something specific, but I think YouTube's not gonna let me say it. But I'll say it in a nicer way. I think you should be neutered like a dog. I think you should be neutered like a dog and then put down like one. You know. Um, you sitting there being like, "Oh, you can't get women in real life, so you think you're gonna turn to entities and demons and whatnot to do that for you." I have to tell you, you are so sorely mistaken. No deity or no goddess, no entity is your toy for you to do that with. You need to go to therapy for your, sexual repression and trauma and whatnot, and you need to be rehabilitated to be a working, a functioning member of society because you are no better than an animal. It really grosses me out when I see certain individuals like hyper sexualized goddesses like Lilith or Hecate, or that they're just running around being like, oh, my only interest in working with like demonic, like the infernal divine or demonic entities and whatnot is to work with succubus because I want to get laid. Okay, okay. Um, it's not the purpose of this at all, but okay. And it also just makes people who have like genuine relationships with these deities that do involve like sex magic and that things of that nature gives them a bad rep too, because everybody just thinks that they're all like weird and creepy and being disrespectful when that's not the case for everybody, but a vast majority of them, yes. And they've just proven time and time again from what I've seen, what other people have seen, and I'm just so sick and tired of seeing women and children and just like other people in general fall victim to greedy and narcissistic men, especially men who come into any type of power, have a whole power trip on it, and they just do disgusting things. I think it's really awful. It's really awful. Um, and I and as a Diana devotee, Diana is my patroness. We do, I very much support Diana and that one peeping Tom man and her lore that she turned into a stag and her dogs ate him. I would do the same. I support I support that so much. And I wish we could still do that because I think it would keep a lot more of these spiritual spaces clean. And I also would just like to point out you hear a lot more about priestesses and these divine high priestesses or priestesses in general, these temples full of sacred women as opposed to men. You don't hear a lot about, where you hear about the priests? You hear about the priests in Abrahamic religions, like the prophets and the priests and whatnot. And sorry, not sorry for the Christians and more so the Catholics. What do you hear about the priests? You hear about them doing inappropriate things with children, especially young boys. That is their reputation. It's not a very good one versus the reputations of priestesses that have been for a lot of different pagan religions and whatnot and in these spaces. So, for all of that combined, I don't think men need to be in, like, they don't need to be in positions of authority. No, and I'm not saying that I don't think men should be practicing spiritual um practices at all. That's not what I'm saying. I think anybody can partake in different spiritual practices as long as you're being safe and you're becoming educated in what you're doing, but they don't need to be in places of power. They don't need to be given these platforms to speak. It really grinds my gears when I see a lot of these different men, especially on big places like TikTok, have these like huge platforms and they're like the known like witch talk or like witchy spiritual people, and I'm just sitting there and I'm just like, they have awful energy. They have awful energy. They kind of don't really know what they're talking about. Kind of don't know what they're talking about. They're very controversial, constantly getting into scandals and whatnot. And I'm sorry to say this as a member of the LGBTQ plus community myself. Sorry to say this, but I do think that, a gay man, just because you are gay and you present a lot of feminine traits and feminine qualities and whatnot, is still not the equivalent of a woman or a person with a womb that has that like specific inherent um like spiritual connection and capacity for more spiritual energy and whatnot. I do not think it's the same because I also do see a lot of, and that's a whole what I'm about to mention is like a conversation for another day, of a lot of gay men who a lot of them don't like women or don't treat women very well. It's a whole thing if you want to go down that rabbit hole of cosplaying as women, taking women's characteristics or making fun of women in some way, and they get a whole big platform off of that. And then I kind of feel like that's a little adjacent to them becoming so popular in spiritual spaces as men when in reality they don't really need to be. They don't really need to be. So sorry, because you being gay does not absolve you of being a man. And how a lot of you don't check your privilege and don't do proper education. And a lot of you have track records of being scammers or predators or just being not so great people, you know. Um, and again, people, nobody likes to say this stuff because it's the unspoken elephant in the room that with a lot of like woke culture and how people are very sensitive these days, you say stuff like this and people, their brain shuts off the second that they don't agree with something that you say. So their critical thinking skills are not turned on and they don't care anymore. And so they just want to get angry and say, you're being XYZ-ist. You're being, like whatever type of phobic instead of actually understanding the context of why that person is explaining their opinions and whatnot. I think it's a lost art for people to just shut up and listen before they decide to open their mouth and give commentary on it. So if I get hate on this video, it is what it is. I have very, very thick skin. Very thick skin. I'm very, very protected. I don't particularly care, but somebody had to say it. And I know a lot of people are thinking it. So the we don't like the white women and we don't like that sounds so awful. I don't mean all white women, but the like we don't like the Karen white women that are in these spaces. Let's put it like that. We don't like them, and we don't like these predatory men. And I feel like I have to do the obligatory like no, it's not all men, but it's most of them. It's most of them to the point that repeatedly, over and over and over and over again, everybody is saying, I would rather take the bear in a forest over a man. And unfortunately, the bear wouldn't even be safe with the amount of things coming out about men abusing animals and doing very, very inappropriate things to animals. So, which reiterates my case, I believe most of them belong in cages. Anyways, last person that we will be looking into for this video. So the last important person in this video is Miss Cordelia Cupp herself, the protagonist of The Residence. And I bring her up because not only was she just amazing in the show, and she did a really, really fantastic job. And I don't think this was, again, I don't know if this was kind of like commentary, like social commentary from like the producer, the screenplay writers, or just how I analyze a lot of different things and I look at things in a lot of different angles and whatnot um, when I watch different types of media. But it's very, very apparent, and like you can kind of see that Cordelia Cupp is played by a black actress. She's black in the show, and everybody else who was basically like in charge, like she was the only woman out of the like investigative team, like at the beginning of the show when the murder takes place and everything. They pull together a group of like all these important people who are investigating the case to find out what happened. She's the only woman, she's a black woman on top of that, and everybody else is a white male. And even within most of like the characters and staff and stuff, you don't really see that many black characters or like people of color. And if they are, they're in the more stereotypical roles of like butlers and maids and people who are normally like the help, unfortunately. And I think it was very, very interesting to have Cordelia be a black woman and that be her role in the show, because you constantly see how all of these white men are just downplaying her, not taking her seriously, kind of dismissing her and her abilities and her talent. But at the end of the day, she's the one who like she's known for being able to solve unsolvable cases. She's amazing at what she does. She's an expert at what she does. And even then, like it gets her some respect, but even then, she's still overlooked at times, and people kind of say certain things about her that I believe is a very, very unfortunate experience of a lot of black women, POC women as well, but very so black women. And it makes me angry and upset about, how I've heard a lot of black women, or, as a woman of color myself, oh, well, as most black women, I've heard them say from their experiences that they have to work 10 times harder to be in any room with any like man or like white women or things like that, because of how the system has been built to be against them. And for me, as a Hispanic woman who I am very light in white passing, but I'm fat, not the, European beauty standard of being a very thin woman. Um, I have also had to work very, very, very hard in comparison to my peers to get to certain places or to prove that I belong in certain places or in certain spaces because I've been judged solely based on my appearance. And I know that is the case for a lot of women of color, but most certainly for a lot of Black women getting disregarded, disrespected, and not being taken seriously just for the color of your skin or the way that you look in this society that cares so much about lookism. Um, it's really, really stupid and really unfortunate, but it made me really happy in the show to for her to, do her big one, get the praise that she deserves. And it also is very, very interesting. I don't want to spoil the story, but at the end, um, between like the person who did it and the detective herself, Miss Cordelia Cup, her breaking down like the reasoning of the person and like why they were doing everything, I really do believe that it foils, you know, like white supremacy and the entitlement that white women have in society and just like the system itself. I think it's a commentary on the system, how the system will always like try to uphold these like white supremacist type of like standards and ideologies and whatnot, and like for the men and the women and like all this that and the third. And it was very, very apparent how in this show like the staff were mainly the people of color, like the Black and the brown people in the basement kept out of sight. And then the like secretary of this, secretary of that, like the big important office people were all mainly predominantly white men, and there was a couple women as well, but mainly they were all white. This contrast, and it just kind of like shows and proves at the end of the day like who cleans up all these messes and who's always right at the end of the day. A Black woman, a woman of color. And in spiritual practices, who are the people who are constantly correcting this misinformation, correcting proper education, teaching about actual practices, trying to uplift their communities, trying to, you know, contribute something outside of themselves. It's always Black women and women of color. And I think whether that was intentional or not, it was a very powerful statement throughout the entirety of the story and how the story is perceived and digested. Um, all of these things are super interconnected, like the racism and the political status and social standing and education, all of this stuff. As much as I know people love to be like, oh, I'm not into politics, I don't want to be like this side versus that side, I don't want to pick a side, I don't like, I love everybody, yada yada yada. All of this stuff is so interconnected that you can't just pull it apart how you would like to. And you can't just address one thing and ignore another part. And that also has to do with spirituality, because it is ingrained into every facet of your life. It is not a trend, it is not an aesthetic, it is a true lifestyle. It's just people living their lives trying to figure out what to do with themselves and trying to make a better life for themselves and trying to heal from the trauma and move on and learn some things that are good for them. And I made this entire video and I've said all of this stuff for I don't even know how long. Editing me will know how long this video is, but I don't know right now. Is that it's important to check your biases and your privilege at the door, and to understand that if you are inhabiting a privileged body right now, to be appreciative and to understand your privileges and to understand when other people may not, and to think about that when you're going about your practice. And I very, very much agree with and support and promote decolonizing your practice, like decolonizing yourself, your mind, decentering men from your life. Because in a patriarchal society, who is the center? It's men. Decentering your life around men, decolonizing yourself, and actually educating yourself on what it is you're doing, what it is you're talking about. And if I have hurt your feelings, that was not my intended purpose, but maybe you will feel empowered to educate yourself now and to go think about things or have a educated conversation about what it is I've been talking about. If anybody would like to talk in the comments, please do so. I'm more than more than happy to talk with people or to provide more education as I can. But I think it's very, very important to acknowledge where you're getting things from, to use history and context as a tool and to give people their flowers when they're deserved, and to become aware and educated of this stuff so that we stop giving platforms to people who just steal and pillage and just take advantage of and abuse. There's more and more of these incidents coming out where people are getting like scammed or preyed upon and whatnot because we're giving these positions of power, we're giving these platforms to these individuals that nobody is stopping to think and say, hey, what is your background? What do you actually know? Like, why are you qualified to be saying X, Y, and Z? Who are you as a person? Because who you are as a person, your actual values and your morals matters when you're trying to do spiritual stuff, when you're trying to educate people, more so when you're trying to do services for people, because all of this is energy and it's all an exchange of energy as the currency. So no, unfortunately, you can't just sit there and want to be ignorant to certain things going on in the world and not want to address political things or not want to address human rights issues and social issues, because it's all interconnected at the end of the day. And if you don't like that, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to tell you. Go talk to whoever you want to talk to upstairs. If you find the person who's in charge of all of this and you get them on the phone line, you please tell me their phone number so I can also dial in, because I have a list of my own complaints. But go complain with them and do not complain at me. I wasn't the one who made all this stuff. I'm just talking about it. So with that being said, thank you so much for staying for this. Probably going to be a longer video. Thank you so much for listening to me. Please share your opinions and thoughts down below. And if nobody told you today, I hope you have a wonderful, lovely day. And I'll talk to you guys soon.